All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on a really interesting story about local government. It's one of those situations where public money, your money, and private interests seem to collide, and it raises some pretty serious questions about trust and accountability. And really, it all boils down to this one question. Did Rutherford County taxpayers unknowingly end up funding a lobbyist who was then used in a political fight? I mean, that question right there gets to the very heart of the matter. It's a huge challenge to how we think public resources are supposed to be used, and it perfectly sets the stage for this story about potential conflicts of interest.
So, before we really dig into the nitty gritty of the allegations, I think it's super important that we understand how this whole system is supposed to work, right? Like, what are the rules in place that are designed to protect the public's trust and, of course, their money? Okay, so the key player in this whole thing is an organization called the TNAO. That stands for the Tennessee Association of Assessing Officers. Now, the most crucial thing you got to remember about them is that they're funded by public dues, money from counties all across the state. Their entire purpose is to be a neutral professional resource for all the county assessors, no favorites. And here's how the money is supposed to flow. It's actually pretty simple. You pay your county taxes. Then, your county uses some of that money to pay dues to the TNAO. And those dues, they fund a full-time director. Now, that last step is the most important one. That director is supposed to serve every single member equally without getting involved in politics. It's designed to be this really clean, clear line of public service.
But you know how these things go? That clear, clean line is about to get, well, pretty blurry. This is where our story takes a big turn, because private interests start to enter the picture, and they really complicate a role that was only ever meant to be public.
And here's the one detail that really opens the door for a potential conflict. The TNAO's director, a guy named Will Delamy, was actually given permission to take on other lobbying jobs, for private clients, completely separate from his official publicly funded duties. So you can basically see him wearing two different hats here. On one side, you've got his public role as the TNAO director, funded by every county to support all assessors. But on the other side, he's a private lobbyist hired by one specific mayor, Joe Carr, to push for a very specific political goal. I mean, you can see right away how the potential for conflict just jumps off the page. And this wasn't just a one-time thing either. The source material points out he had a whole bunch of outside clients. We're talking multiple counties, E911 agencies, EMS groups, even the County Mayors Association. So this lobbying work was a pretty significant part of his job. And it's exactly this juggling act between his public and private roles that leads us straight to, well, to the most serious part of this whole story. This is the moment where those blurred lines are alleged to have been completely crossed, turning into a direct political conflict. The accusation is that a publicly funded position was basically used as a weapon in a local fight. And here's the central allegation, and this is a direct quote from the source material. Carr used Denami to provide inside information on assessments to attack Assessor Mitchell. Wow. I mean, that's a direct and a very, very serious charge.
But the blame doesn't just stop with those two guys. The accusation actually extends all the way up to the leadership of the TNAO itself. The claim is that the executive board let this happen either because of, and this is another quote, incompetent or complicit leadership. That suggests a huge potential failure of oversight right at the very top.
So you might be thinking, okay, why does a local dispute like this matter to me? Well, it's because the principles that are at stake here, we're talking transparency, fairness, the proper use of our tax dollars, these are the absolute bedrock of good government, no matter where you live. And a situation like this really forces us, as citizens, to step back and ask some really fundamental questions about how our institutions are being run. First off, was a position that was designed to serve everyone equally actually turned into a weapon to settle a political score? I mean, this question cuts right to the heart of ethics and what it means to abuse a public position. And what about all the other counties? The ones that paid their dues, expecting fair, impartial service. Did this whole arrangement violate the TNAO's fundamental promise to all its members? It's really a question of basic fairness and integrity. And finally, this leads to the big systemic question. How do the rules even allow for a situation like this to begin with? Why were outside contracts that seem to create such an obvious conflict of interest even permitted in the first place? It really points to a need for much better safeguards. Because at the end of the day, the real cost here isn't just about one political fight. The real cost is so much bigger. It's the erosion of public trust, it's potentially wasted tax dollars, and it's a breakdown in accountability, the very things that are supposed to keep our government honest. And that brings us full circle, right back to these 3 pillars. These are the principles that every citizen expects and, frankly, deserves. Transparency, so we know how decisions are being made, integrity from our public officials, and a deep, fundamental respect for the rule of law.
And so we're going to end this with a question, not an easy answer. Because when public trust gets challenged like this, the path forward is never simple. It really forces all of us to think about what true accountability actually looks like. And maybe more importantly, what we have to demand from the people who hold public office.